Okay, we are live on YouTube, and Emily is just posting that to the school committee website. I think we can start public comment. So if anyone has any public comment to make, please raise your hand and I will call on you.
Sarah, can I just pause us? Is Lisa taking minutes for this or am I?
I believe Lisa is. She is on this call.
Okay, I just wanted to confirm. Thank you.
All right. Emily, you good yet? Yep. We're good. All right, I see one hand. Catherine Martin, please remember to state your name and address for the record.
No problem. Catherine Martin, 29 West Shore Drive. I'm going to be speaking kind of just off the cuff about what I witnessed this morning at the budget subcommittee FinCom meeting. So it seemed to me that everybody on the FinCom and the town side of the budget clearly understood that we were not getting a penny over level funding. And I want to know at what point our school committee liaisons were made aware of that. And I want to know why our delta that was presented this morning went from 800,000 to 300,000 without having a public meeting in between. And if you could present that tracking sheet tonight, that would be great. So we can all understand how we made that change. And it was also pretty abundantly clear that the town seemed to feel like they told you back in November that any money over level funding would need to be an override. And I don't ever recall any of you discussing needing an override to fund the $1 million priority ask that's been put forward to our community over the last few weeks. So I'm looking for a lot of clarity tonight in our budget update. I want to see the 800 to the 300,000 tracking. I want to know exactly what date you found out that we were just getting level funded. Because for the last 3 weeks, we've all been tuning in to subcommittee meetings to talk about a priority list. And these priorities are exactly what they are. That's exactly what they are, priorities. These are our math curriculum. This is preschool program. I don't know how many years I'm going to hear Mandy Murphy ask for the guidance counselor, but here we are again, begging for another guidance counselor at Village. Your job is the budget and to hire and fire a superintendent. Your job is not to spend hours talking about naming a school and getting in the weeds about facilities meetings and PPE. I was so just upset by the dereliction of duty that I saw this morning from the FinCom and the selectmen and from the school committee in funding the education of our kids in this town. So I'm really hoping that tonight's budget update is very clear in how we're moving forward and how we're going to make all this work.
Thank you, Catherine. Kim Day, don't forget your address as well, please.
Hi, Kim Day, 18 Liberty Road. I'll keep it brief. I have a lot of the same kind of input as Katie did just now. It would really be helpful if there could be a detailed discussion on how the budget subcommittee came and closed the gap quote that we have with the town from the 800,000 plus to the 331 that was shared this morning. And in looking at those budget priorities, it also seems to be that from the last budget committee meeting, school committee meeting, where it was presented those list of priorities, there was a high school academic skills that was included that's no longer even on the list, not let alone in that tier 1 bucket in that green listing. So it would just be really helpful to hear more and kind of how those discussions came to be and how we're arriving at that number. And regardless of that, just, facing the fact that, the town and FinCom is saying that we have to close that $331,000 gap that's existing right now, that the only way that we're going to close that is with cuts or by finding new revenue sources, that there is no more money coming from the town. And so what does that mean? Like, does that mean that we're going to be having staffing cuts or programming cuts? Or does that mean that we're just going to say that we can't fund technology or the guidance counselor at Village this year? I think parents and the community like really deserves to have that level of transparency and what the trade-offs are that we're really considering. And the last thing I'll just say is, you know, it's frustrating as a parent in a town like Marblehead that we're talking about making these types of trade-offs when we don't even know next year what we're going to be facing with our student population coming back to school after a year of being out and having an education during a pandemic. And we're not even addressing that within our budget for next year. So I just really hope that the conversation this evening answers a lot of these questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Erin Noonan.
Erin Noonan, Beverly Ave. I just was hoping that we could get it. I know that we didn't decide to do the strategic needs-based budgeting this year. And, you know, we were in a year of COVID. I guess I'm confused if we need a whole nother year of a normal year before we can start having that conversation, or we're ready to do that June 1st. For real. My second point I just wanted to make was that I love athletics and everything, but I see a lot of it on the agenda. I really liked us to start seeing on the agenda the learning, like an agenda item around learning loss and remediation needs and what that impact is to our budget in terms of how we were going to spend the money that we have dedicated from the state for this purpose. Thank you.
Thank you, Erin. All right, I don't see any more hands up, so that will move us on to our MOU with the Marblehead Education Association. So we have this, I emailed this to you guys last night after it was presented to the MEA. They have ratified it. So it is now in our court to vote. So does anybody have any questions on it before we move ahead with that? Sarah?
So some of these elements in here, and I recognize this is a contract between the schools and the teachers union, so it's all going to be teachers union specific. I get that, but I just want to ask for a few clarifications because I think that parents and community members are looking for some of these same safeguards to be put in place for our students. For instance, where we see air purifiers will be made available to any teacher or staff member who requests them. If a parent requests them, if their child doesn't have them in their classroom, but they request them to be placed in their child's classroom, will that be granted as well? And, you know, just other elements, I don't need to go through every one, but other elements like that where, oh, there was one about, if there's a positive, now that if we're below 6 feet and there's a positive case, the teacher in the class will be notified that there's a positive case. Will that safeguard be put in place for students? You know, you've heard me preach this before about, you know, like the strep letter or the lice letter. Or is that a safety measure that we're only giving the staff?
It was only agreed to for staff.
Yeah.
In the MOA.
So it's for staff, and the staff are not being notified, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this is what I remember, the staff are not being notified which student it is because that is a violation of privacy. It's just that there is a student in your class, which basically they get that information anyways.
Which no, I totally agree with. And that's what the strep letter is as well. It's there's a student in your class that's been diagnosed. Here are the symptoms and signs, blah, 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 blah. That's, we've all gotten it. So I would like it to be considered that we give these same options and safeguards to our students as we do for faculty, because it's just common sense, in my opinion.
So anyone, I'll also just note this because this is this piece that matters with the less than 6 feet distancing, is that students will be notified because they will start to become close contacts. And so anyone who is a close contact, obviously you're not going to be notified as to who, but you will be notified as a student / family that your child is now a close contact and now you have to quarantine.
I think we're still dancing around it. I'm looking for it to go out to the whole class and be treated, COVID to be treated the same way any other communicable disease or communicable, I mean, lice isn't a disease, I don't know what to call it, but communicable nuisance is treated in our school system.
So I think it is what it is in the MOA. That's what's been voted by the teachers.
So,
Can you just speak?
have we just run this by our own council, just to dot our i's and cross our t's?
I have not, but we can. It's taken from the math site, the language that other districts have approved. And since this was just specifically for the distancing and the notification requirements, and it did not have any sort of a budgetary implication, I didn't want to invest in John Foskett reviewing it, but if we want him to review it, we certainly can.
So this has been used in other districts, the same exact.
Just the public can't hear what Megan is saying.
Sorry, I just asked if this has been run by our own legal counsel.
Okay, no, I mean, I think any collective bargaining agreement should. It's money well spent.
Certainly can. That's the will of the committee. We can certainly invest that money. I think getting it from another approved, and since it doesn't have a budgetary implication, but I'm happy to run it by John Foss.
I think I'm comfortable. Well, I know I'm comfortable voting this with the caveat that it needs to pass, our legal counsel, but I'm pending legal counsel approval. I'm happy to make that vote. And then I just want to, this document will be put up on the website, right?
It's already in our.
Perfect. Okay, because I think that section 2, I think will clear up anything that might come back later on that says we didn't know this. Section 2, I think will be helpful to people to just have a sense of clarity.
And I know that there are a lot of air purifiers out there. A lot.
I think we just ordered another 268. So there is not a shortage of air purifiers. And I just don't want to lose the forest through the trees here. This is a great thing for our district. The agreement with MEA and getting the distancing to reflect what CDC has updated, the Mass Department of Public Health, and getting our 7 to 12 students back in school when DESE hasn't even identified a date for high schools. So, I'm happy to do a little more due diligence on this, but let's not lose what a good thing this is for the district.
That's a good point. Sorry, John, you're right. And I know you and Sarah have worked, hard with the MEA, and so it's nice to see that collaboration. So thank you also to the MEA and to the teachers for all their work on this too. So that's a good point. Thank you.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the aforementioned MOA with the MEA pending approval by our legal counsel.
Sarah made the motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Emily, second. I'll just go on the record too and say that although it didn't make it into this because it wasn't a stipulation by the teachers, is it Beth and the high school or just the high school where we're going to put out the surgical masks to be that the kids are not going to be forced to take, but they will have the ability to grab one each morning as they walk into school and get their hand sanitizer and everything. So there are additional pieces that are going on within the building that just simply weren't a piece that the teachers demanded within this.
Is that to double layer, or if they didn't have it, they can just get it at school?
Both. Yeah. So they can trade off their own.
Oh, got it.
We've always had masks for anybody who doesn't have one at school. But they can trade off their own if they feel safer. They can double up on their own.
Great.
Yep. All right. So we've got a motion and it's seconded. I will roll call vote. Sarah Gold, yes. Emily Barron,
Yes.
Megan Taylor,
Yes.
Sarah Fox,
Yes.
and David Harris.
Did I go digital?
Yeah. And now you're back.
Okay. Yes.
Okay, great. All right. Wonderful. That passes 5-0.
I mean, we didn't have discussion. I didn't chime in, but I would also like to just say thanks to everyone involved in getting us to this point. And I think it's an exciting stage. We all know where the pandemic has taken us, and the fact that we are looking at April 5th of being back, full time for our younger students and half day for the high school. And then after the school vacation, coming back full time. I'm really excited about it. I want to thank all of the administrators, teachers who have had to pivot multiple times since September in working through this. I'm sure that the students are excited. We've heard, well, each of you have students that have gone back to school, how it was treated as a first day of school and how exciting it was, and the different events that have taken place across the district. And I'm just really looking forward to this. And I know that this is just the beginning of more good things to come with the vaccinations that are out there for teachers and educational professionals and food service people. And it's going to allow for more and more opportunity for us to get back to the norm. And I can only expect and hope that, Dan Bauer and his team are looking to see, what this means for graduation this year, and how graduation might look a little bit different, and how some of the moving up programs that we missed out on last year when our 8th graders weren't able to go to the high school. It really truly is, Dr. Bucky. I agree. This is an exciting time as we're transitioning forward to be back to what we hired you to be in, which was a district, that didn't have all of these restrictions. And I think everybody's looking forward to it. And thanks to everybody who is making this happen. It's really exciting.
I think there'll be some graduation updates in the near future.
Yeah.
So.
Great.
All right, John, that leads us to the superintendent report. First up, we have Greg is kind of on the hot seat tonight during this. So he's going to come and chat with us about a softball field group that wants to do some work. Greg, welcome.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me again. I'm not sure who has the ability, but if Lisa or one of you guys could share your screen with the pictures I sent over, that would be appreciated.
All right, can you see that?
Yeah, that's great.
Great.
So obviously I would be able to present this in person normally with a bigger version of this, but this is the best we could do here for a drawing. So basically what we are hoping to do is, if you kind of imagine yourself coming through the entrance at the Veterans Middle School, you kind of come down between the tennis and the pickleball courts and the school, and you come around the corner and you see kind of that back small parking lot that overlooks towards the tree department. That area is what we're hoping to kind of clear out a little bit. There's a little hill there that we're hoping to kind of cut down a little bit and kind of grade. The area behind the batting cage that you can see where it says proposed storage container, that's for a different time, but that area is what I'm talking about, to kind of cut that back and then also put some crushed stone down there. This will allow for spectators or for anybody to walk behind there to view a game or just to walk through. Moving over, you'll see a tree cluster that is currently right next to the scoreboard. And we actually just purchased a new scoreboard for the spring, which will be here in a couple of weeks. And anytime it gets blustery or windy out there, it kind of hits against the scoreboard. So we're hoping to either at a minimum cut those back, but hopefully remove those trees. Then if you get back in your screen here. Now, if you're looking at kind of the green area where it's kind of talks about ledge and other areas, we're hoping to grade that down to make two kind of leveled seating areas, kind of two different levels, almost like the stadium seating. That's kind of a rocky area right now. That's going to be just kind of cleaned up and get some grass planted there. And that will allow for additional seating rather than having kind of everybody just line that left field fence or go into the outfield. We're also hoping to put an actual fence down the right field foul line. As you can kind of see, you can kind of see kind of the L shape that's in the top right of the screen right now. That area is what we're hoping to kind of put a black fence that you would kind of see like over Piper Field or kind of along the parking lot fence, just kind of your typical black fence. There's a mesh temporary one there as it is right now. It would go from kind of the end of the batting cage area to the end of the Rocky area. There'll be a door there which will allow for kids to get frisbees or balls or anything that goes over the fence. And there'll also be a door put in there that will swing open for mowers or tractors to get through for it to mow. Any questions before I continue? I don't want to keep talking too fast. Sorry if I am.
Yeah, Greg, if I could, I still am not oriented with this. I'm familiar with the baseball field, so.
So this is that you're looking down the
the
right
parking-
field foul line right now at the veterans softball field.
So Greg, can you see my cursor on here?
Right field. Right, I can see a cursor.
David, this isn't the
Okay.
baseball field. This is the softball field.
Yeah, if I said baseball, I'm sorry. I'm familiar with the softball field behind vets and
So are you familiar
So
where
Greg,
like the
is
little
this-
the
like
snack shed is,
where's
David?
home plate? Where's the parking lot? I can't.
It'd be kind of like in the upper left corner of the screen right now. So like the where it says batting cage, David,
Right.
is there another picture you guys can scroll over to? So this is like a closer version to the school, David. So this would be like the away dugout.
Okay.
And then the batting cage is what kind of the other picture was kind of, I wanted to kind of move over to the other side so I could talk about kind of grading that area.
So Greg,
So
the parking lot that has the farmer's market is basically right here.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. And then the school is sort of, well over here.
Yes. And there's kind of like a red or it's a white shed that's there right now. David, it's kind of their snack shed that would be kind of right behind that dugout.
Okay. I'm with you now. I see what you're saying.
Sorry, I should have asked to make sure everybody was kind of clear what I was talking about first. Are there any other questions before I continue here?
Sorry, can we just go
Yeah.
back to the prior picture? Now that I have a better feel. Okay.
So
Greg,
this area, hold on just one second, Sarah. So this area right here where my cursor is at, that's far right field of the,
Correct. Yeah.
okay.
And that's like wooded kind of now, right?
Yeah. It's very ledgy over there right now. But you can kind of see that there are kind of two separate sections of ledge that kind of come out and then another one that kind of goes down and out. They're going to kind of fill that in with some dirt to make it two different levels and then plant some grass there to allow for some right field seating rather than just having people sit along the left field fence or in the outfield.
Okay.
So this long fence comes all the way,
This one?
yeah, that one comes all the way down to the end of where the ledge is.
Correct. Yeah. It's about
And
100 feet.
And then
Maybe a
that
little
one
more,
along,
110 feet.
okay, and then the rest of the fence just goes along the back, like,
I'll
the
get to that in
back
just a second. Yeah. I wanted to see if there's
Right,
any questions first.
okay.
Yeah, Sarah's got some questions.
2 points. So the tree thing, that you should just be able to call the tree department, and I can't remember who took over for Tex Gordon, but whoever took over for him, you should be able to just call them and if there's town trees that are impeding, on the scoreboard or whatever, that's a quick fix. They should be able to come out in the next week, I would think, and trim those back.
Yep. I just want to make sure that was clear with everything that we're hoping to get done, just so it's
Okay.
on the table,
And
that's
then
all.
the second piece is this something you need school committee approval for? Because this seems like it's operations to me and not school committee.
I'm not sure. I wanted to be kind of just clear with everybody because there is one more piece that I was going to talk about, which is a bigger piece that we can talk about in a minute. But I wanted to see if there's any other questions before I.
Okay. All right.
Greg, who owns the softball fields? Do you know? Because the pickleball courts that are on that property are owned by the town, so we don't have control over those. But who owns this property?
It's a school department field. This is part of the kind of behind the Veterans Middle School,
Okay,
but they're school fields.
okay,
They're softball fields in the spring and their middle school field hockey fields in the fall. And they do some intramurals, recess, PE classes out there as well throughout the year.
All right, I think you can proceed.
Okay, and then finally, as you can kind of see in like the kind of top right of the picture there, that final fence, we had purchased a chain link fence 2 springs ago, and we are planning on installing that over April break. It is removable. It's a bigger than what we have now. Right now, there's a mesh outfield fence that pretty regularly will get beat up either by just general play of softball, recess, getting cut by lawnmowers or weed whackers. Just it kind of takes a beating most springs and summer. And getting a chain link fence in there is something that we were hoping to get installed. The sleeves of the fence go down 18 inches into the ground. And then they're capped, and the cap goes 4 inches below the level of the grass, and then they get filled in with dirt and capped from there. So it's safe to play field hockey or other intramurals, et cetera, on that field. And
So
then the last thing that we would do is there's like I mentioned, the shed before, just give that a paint job to make it red rather than white, and just kind of spruce it up a little bit to make it look a little better.
So did the poles for the temporary fence, do those come out as well?
No,
Are
those stay in. There's a little more than half of them are in there right now. They've been in there for 2 years.
Okay.
And that piece of fence that we're talking about now, Greg, does that just go along the very back of the field?
So that would be like a home run fence, basically. It would kind of separate the actual softball field of play from the additional grass field that's kind of beyond that. Normally we have like a mesh fence that goes up and it has plastic sleeves that go into the ground.
Yep.
And if kids run into those, whether it's playing softball or not, they can snap, or they can actually get fairly dangerous. Whereas the metal ones, you hope wouldn't snap, obviously. And then will be a little more permanent in the ground, but then the actual fence itself is removable.
So the fence comes out for when field hockey needs to play, right? Because the fence goes.
So the fence will
right?
basically go in during April break and come out as soon as the youth softball league is done in the summertime. But it is
Okay.
removable. So like if they had a field day or something, for example, on the backfield, it could be taken out within an hour or two at the most.
And so I might have missed this at the very beginning, so I apologize, but the work that needs to be done to create those 2 seating levels and the putting the stones down and stuff, who pays for that?
It's actually being donated by a local company.
That's awesome. That's generous.
And then, because I know that the back fence is sort of the point of contention here.
Correct.
That temporary fence. How far back on that field is it going? And I understand that it's the home run fence, but that field is big and it kind of slopes up at the very end, at the very back of it, leading up to a street up top with into a neighborhood. How far does this fence go back? Does it kind of cut the field in half?
So, I mean, depending on where you look at it. So like if you're looking at the very right field, which is kind of what we're looking at right now, where you talked about that slope and kind of like just beyond that ledge area, it would come probably maybe 20 feet before that hill starts to get inclined. And then it just kind of just goes around like your fence would kind of like around a baseball field. So I at some points it would cut the field in half, and other points it would cut it in a little less and maybe in a little bit more, depending on, again, which way you're looking at it and where you're looking. Does that make sense? Not
Kind
really. So if you just kind of like just picture kind of just like I don't know the degree of turn on it. It's
Yeah.
it's
No, I
it's a
get
round
what you're
fence.
saying.
I
I guess
believe it's 200 feet from home plate. I want to say that's what the furthest out is.
and 200 feet
Is it like a-
in the diamond. Okay.
The strong shoot. Sorry.
So I think that this piece is kind of why it's coming before school committee. The other piece is more like the contract stuff where it's just kind of good for us to know what's going on at our facilities.
Yeah, correct.
I'm wondering if I guess I would feel better with this fence just because there is some discord about it. If we could get a more of a satellite view and see exactly how it's going to cut into it, because I know one of the criticisms is that obviously it's important for the softball team, but that it's going to inhibit like gym classes at the vets. And I know there's a few concerns kind of coming up about some of the outdoor activities that we're doing for COVID and that type of thing. So I'm wondering if we can kind of give you the blessing on the ledge work and kind of the cleanup stuff, and then come back with a little bit more concrete plan about this fence. I guess that's where my head is at. Feel free to overrule me.
Has anybody seen the mesh fence that's out there in season?
So
No.
if you go
David
to
has.
Google Earth, you can see it. It lays it all out for you. So maybe,
It's literally going to be this. It's going to be the same thing. It's just going to be different material. That's all it. It's still a fence. It's still a temporary removable fence. It's not anything permanent that's going to be there forever. It's not going to be any further away or closer to home plate or the other fence. But obviously, you guys can make your decision. I just wanted to give you kind of the facts of what we're hoping to do.
Anybody else want to weigh in?
So I'll jump in. Like many things, Marblehead, it does not come without controversy, and I'm sure David can probably speak to this, that it came up a couple years ago. And so there are people that feel passionately on both sides of this. And so I didn't want school committee to be blindsided by a group coming in, doing repair work, installing a fence, without you at least having the idea that it did have some history to it. And I felt like you needed to be updated before a fence went in that could have potential concerns with Park and Rec or the middle school back.
So I'm all for beautifying a space. And if there's a group that wants to help us with that, that's incredibly generous. And we are very thankful and fortunate for that. I think though, and I'm not trying to make anybody mad here, but I just think that really between Greg and yourself and Matt, you guys can figure out what's going to work. But I think because it's Matt's build, the vet's building, the principal needs to, be on board with it as well. So I'm sure the three of you can work it out. I think if everyone's happy with it, I'm happy with it. And I think, some of the ideas around the seating and the stonework, I think that will definitely make it nicer. So I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, I'm really grateful for the if it's a community group or a community member who wants to donate that time and all that work and probably things that go into that work. Yeah, I like that idea, Megan.
And I would just add into that group the freshman field hockey coach and it's Peter James, right, Greg, from Park and Rec?
Yes.
That making sure, since they're going to be maintaining these fields, that they're in agreement with everything that's going on and aware of what we're doing.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. All right, great. All right. I'm going to stop the share.
Thanks, Greg.
Thank you, Greg, but hold on, because Greg's up next as well. So there was some updated spectator guidance for athletics that came out, I think last week, maybe late the week before. So I've asked Greg to fill us in on that as well.
Yep. So for our outdoor athletic contests, we're able to now have 2 spectators per athlete, not just home athlete like we had before. So we can get away fans going to away games or away fans coming to our facility now for football and outdoor track or indoor track that's run outside currently. The leagues decided to stick with just 2 spectators for home athletes for volleyball, just because of indoor space. You're very limited with the amount of room you have to spread out the volleyball players on top of all the spectators. So we decided to stay as a league with just 2 spectators for indoor sports. But for outdoor sports, we're allowing 2 per athlete for both home and away. So that'll hopefully move forward with the spring season as well, with baseball, softball, lacrosses, and tennises, and outdoor track and sailing. That's kind of where we're at right now, which is a step in the right direction, I think. And we're pretty excited to have our fans go and see their kids play, and then also welcome in some away fans as well.
Yeah, I think that's really good news. I know I had asked this of you in reopening last week. I just want to press a little bit harder on it. So I know one of the things that weighed into the determination on 2 fans was the piece of, particularly pertaining to football, where you've got the cheerleaders and the band is involved as well, so that they would be able to have people come. When all of those people aren't involved, I guess I just have concerns over, like, it's great that we're getting 2 fans in, but for parents, particularly of our younger high schoolers who probably could very well have younger siblings that can't stay home alone, it sort of binds them a little bit in how they're actually able to watch the game. Is there any wiggle around being able to have an additional family member, like a child, if they're staying seated with the family the whole time? Especially at those, I understand that there's capacity issues at the varsity football level, but for like the freshman teams,
It does get a little challenging to allow it for one sport and not the other. To be honest, it's not really fair necessarily. And I would have some concerns if we're starting to allow siblings in for outdoor sports when we're pretty much maxed out. If we were to have 2 spectators for all of our away athletes, plus 2 spectators for our home athletes and cheerleaders and band members, we're pretty much at capacity as it is. We did do it for the fall season. We did it for the winter season, where people made it work. I don't mean to sound unflexible, but it's a little bit challenging to allow it for one sport and not the other, to be honest.
okay. All right, it's good news. Yeah, it's great news.
But we're definitely
forward.
excited. If there's any questions, I'm happy to try to answer them for you.
Anybody else have any questions? That was my one.
I think. Awesome.
All right, Greg, thank
All
you
right.
very much.
Thanks, Greg.
Thank you.
All right, John, that leads us to in-person learning update. I think
Yep. Well,
Dan and Matt.
we got the exciting news that we are continuing toward April 5th for 7 to 12, but I know committee had some questions about what it will look like once it is implemented. So Matt Fox and Dan will come and give you updates 7 and 8, then 9 to 12.
Great. Welcome.
Thank you. So I guess the question from the last meeting was around quarantine students. Is that what we're going to then address
Yes.
first? Okay. So we're going to take a 3-phase approach to support students who have to face time out of school. So the first phase are for students awaiting a test result. Given that PCR tests are usually completed in the first day or in just a day or two, 24 hours, those are going to be treated as typical absences in the school year. So the student would just monitor the Google Classroom, check their assignments, reach out or possibly email their teachers if they have any questions, as they would on a typical absence. So those are for students. It's phase 1 for students with a test result. Phase 2 are for students who are under a quarantine order, wherever that comes from, whether it's from within school or without. What we're going to do is we're going to put together a quarantine education coordinator. So this coordinator will help us manage the students' education while they're in quarantine. So the coordinator will contact the family and the student and the student's teachers. They'll provide teachers the approximate time the student will be out of school. They'll coordinate any additional communications above and beyond what's in Google Classroom for students, and then keep daily check-ins with those students and passing on additional information, maybe specific things, helping maybe set up appointments. And then coordinating with the student will be daily check-ins in the morning before school, probably around 7:30, ensuring that the student has a structure for their day for Google Classroom assignments and monitoring what's put in Google Classroom. And then an afternoon checkout after dismissal to make sure the student sort of went through the day successfully, and if they should be connected with a teacher at that point too. And then a couple other possible connections would be the coordinator could offer the student the chance to log in and audit our core remote classes, English, Math, Science, and Social Studies, that are being taught to our elective remote students while they're in quarantine. The caveat is, obviously, that's going to be a little different than what they experience in a day-to-day basis. So it just so happens all of our elective remote classes are taught on our 2 black teams, Black 8 and Black 7. So if a student's on the red team, they'd be trying to audit a class that, teachers they don't really know, but they could still come in. Lucky for us is that our teachers are outstanding and they're co-planning. So going from team to team is a pretty successful experience. We've offered that a few times to students. We had to step away from that when the school year began because we were dealing with such large numbers, and we maxed out really quickly. With this 4th quarter, we're having a large number of our elective remote students come back to school, so we have a little bit more space now to support this. We've actually had students that turn that down. They say they'd rather keep up the Google Classroom and things like that. So we'll see. And then if needed, we also thought about the coordinator possibly creating or setting up a Wednesday homework club. We only have homework clubs typically on Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday. We'll set up an elective Wednesday homework club, especially with the student's math teacher, because math is leveled. And so even if they audit the math course being taught remotely, it's going to be a little different than possibly their own current math class. And then phase 3 would be for when our student numbers that have to quarantine exceed our capacity in phase 2. And that's when, in consultation, obviously with the superintendent, a decision would have to be made for a team or a grade or possibly the whole school to possibly go remote for a period of time to allow a flare-up of cases to subside. So that's the 3-phase approach we came up with here at BETS.
Sarah?
So during a period where a child is under quarantine, whether it's for just quarantine or for an active case, I guess it doesn't really make a difference either way. They will have no live instruction. I mean, if they they choose this audit, but it won't be live instruction from the casework that necessarily matches up with their Google Classroom.
It's going to be live instruction. It's the same. It's more or less the same material that's being taught in their regular classes. Obviously, if they're on the black team, it'll be the same teachers they have. And like I said, even if they're not on the black team, the material between our classes team to team are pretty close to each other within a couple of days, if at worst. So it's along those lines of, like I said, we've had some students do it in the past and it was successful in supporting the students when they're out. Is it perfect? No. Is there, could there be some differences? Yes. And like I said, mathematics will be the difference because you go from a leveled math class in person to an unleveled math class in our remote class. But at the same time, I think we can be fairly successful with it because, when we started doing this to start the year, we didn't stop because it wasn't successful per se. We stopped because we got overwhelmed with numbers. Because at that point, our quarantine numbers were 25 and 26 for our 2 grades. We're now looking at below 10 and about 13. So it gives us a little bit more wiggle room, a little bit more, and with longer classes, a little bit more of a chance to maybe individualize for that student who's popping in if the teacher doesn't know them very well. Or if the teacher does know them, to maybe, especially mathematics, customize what they're going to see by the end of the period.
So if there were, a need to quarantine in a class, or on a team, I guess, because you do have the team approach, I guess it's reasonable to think with the 3-foot spacing, if we have a positive case on that team, you could have I don't know, like 6 or 7 kids needing to quarantine.
Yeah,
Maybe not. I mean, that's
maybe more.
maybe more. Okay.
So,
okay.
you know, I'll tell it. So if a student goes to the day, they have 6 classes a day. If they're sitting within 3 feet of a class where, you know, our average class size is about 21. So they're sitting inside of a core of anywhere from 4 to 6 students, depending upon where they're sitting. So it could be
Like 24 kids. So
Yeah.
one positive case is you're looking at 24 kids. That's a little worse than my math came up with. So realistically, one case could push you over the edge of being able to absorb those kids for a quote unquote audit.
And I think that needs to, it's sort of be a case by case situation, because you never know who the student might be. You never know if it's going to be, if they're going to run through some of our larger classes, some of our smaller classes, maybe they sat along the wall. You know, there's all those little intricacies that are really hard to predict right now. You know, I think, I mean, to be very realistic, I think we're talking in phase 2, probably about a max of 10, you know, 10 per grade at the most. But you never know. I mean, it just sort of depends on how it plays out.
So 1 to 2 cases could push you into a phase 3.
Yeah, that's the reality. Yeah. I mean, we're
Well, I
within
think it's
3
better for people to have a realistic view of what we're looking at ahead of
because
time.
if you're talking 36 kids on a team, that's 1/3 of our students on a team. So that would be 1 out of every 3 students in roughly every class they go through.
Cases have we
Do you
had?
have the capabilities to live stream those classes in that team now or no?
No.
Megan?
Matt, how many cases have we had at Vets this year? Do you know? Like,
The
roughly?
total number of cases with all on our campus, well,
Students.
students, it's about 9, I think, 8 or 9.
That's significant when you multiply it by 24 to 36.
Scattered, you know, we you know, I'll be very, you know, knock on some wood here. You know, we
Thank
haven't
you.
had, you know, that sort of back-to-back clustering type approaches. And to be honest, the vast majority of our cases that were positive happened while they were already on quarantine, because of a possible where they were out because they were contact of a contact, which doesn't mean anything for the student sitting next to them in school, but the family was being cautious, and then a positive case came back. So that's the vast majority of our students that go positive, because honestly, families did the right thing. And that's what we have to sort of count on people moving forward is families do the right thing.
So Matt, let me ask you, is there
Good point.
anything we can do from our standpoint, whether it be budget or anything else or policy, that we can do to better enable you to keep the ideal is we never go to phase 3. We don't want to be shutting our schools down again. Is there anything we can provide for you or do for you that's going to help you in these quarantine cases, if we have positive cases, to stay in phase 2, where we can still keep as many kids in person as possible and not have to shut down the whole school? You know, is it funding so that you could have people, you know, taking on another longer term, or like a sub or something to take on these kids in a remote class setting? I mean, I don't know what the answer is, but I just want to know, is there a tool we can give you that ensures not going to phase 3?
Well, you know, I think you have to be also realistic that we're not going to find qualified staff in time to partially or possibly staff any additional things that might possibly happen coming down the road. Additionally, even though we have 2 outstanding building subs, they are building subs, and you know, their ability to instruct across the entire curriculum on a multiple day basis. I mean, that could be a way we could expend it, you know, extend our numbers some more. And that's why I said it's hard for me I didn't put any numbers. When I shared this with Dr. Bucky today, I didn't put any numbers on these different phases, because it's very difficult to sort of say that this is the definite, you know, what if it's 12, you know, or 14, and you know, we can sort of squeeze some things through and, you know, work some things out. I think the reality is it's the 3 feet. There's nothing beyond going to more than 3 feet. And we can't do that with everybody coming back, because, you know, a positive case is a positive case, and it cuts a wide swath through a school. And so I think it's unfortunate, but but that's really where we're at. And we would do everything we could within our power to keep as many kids in school as we can, and to obviously stay out of phase 3. There's no way that any of us want to end up in a, Swampscott type situation that happened a couple weeks ago. So that's why we really have to count on parents to, keep their kids at home when they're not feeling well. If there's a suspected case, take a day, see what happens with a test, all those right things to really mitigate any cases that come into our building. Because if they come into our building, it's really gonna, to use the same phrase again, cut a wide swath, and it's gonna be difficult. But like I said, our priority is keeping kids in school.
Yeah, I think that that's a really, there's a lot of really good points in there. I think it bears noting that the cases what you're saying, Matt, is that many of the cases that you've had thus far this year, which to me, I'm taking this as 9 total since September or mid-September, since we entered the building. So let's kind of let that sink in for a moment. That many of those 9 also were not in school when they were positive. So if you can turn positive, you can be taken out on quarantine, not impacting any of the children that are sitting around you, then test positive and you're still not impacting the other children who are sitting next to you. It's that 48 hours that you have to, from positive, that then you start contact tracing backwards. So many of the 9 really would not have impacted learning anyways. That it wouldn't have impacted the children around them.
Yeah, if I were to go back and take a look at that, that would be a correct statement, that the vast majority of our kids that became sick happened already on quarantine.
Yeah, because I think it's really important that we really have sort of like the correct information out there as to how contact tracing works, because it is complicated and it does require a lot of kind of like, tracing back of when somebody was in a building, when they were contacted, when they tested positive, and all that kind of thing. Also, shoot, I just lost my train of thought. I think it's worthwhile to note that phase 3 doesn't necessarily mean full remote. Phase 3 means we're taking a step back, that if we have any kind of widespread or in-school spread, that could mean we pull remote. But if it's a quarantine situation where we've got a couple of these cases who happen to be in school when they were positive, that it tips the in-person piece more than it tips the overall safety piece. Because from everything that I read, when kids are masked, when our buildings are well ventilated, that 3 feet is actually quite a safe distance for people. It's the non-masked time when kids are in close contact with each other, inside, in poorly ventilated spaces. That's when our spread is happening. And I believe, to reference the Swampscott piece, that's sort of what happened with that as well, just to kind of make that all clear. Yeah, Matt.
And then, I can support some of that, because, we track all of our issues, we'll say, that are related to COVID, whether it be traveling, whether it be, a family says we're traveling, we're gonna get tested, and we track that. We've tracked well over 240 issues at this point, since the start of the school year. And, this is the number of cases we're sitting at, for our building, less than 20 total. So, I mean, there are mitigation efforts that are successful in our school. There are, period. It's just the unfortunate piece is, the CDC draws a line.
Absolutely. Yep.
And that's what we have to follow.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. I want them to change that, but it's not changed, and that's where we're at. So it's a 6-foot contact, and that's what we're going into. And I just want to make it clear that it is not necessarily, phase 3 is not necessarily fully remote. It's a step back. So it could mean that we step backwards into hybrid again. And I think this is going to go for the high school as well. It also could mean that we end up remote, depending on what's actually going on at the building level.
Yeah, I think the big difference between phase 2 and phase 3 for me is we've sort of exceeded our capacity to juggle and do things for students in that way.
Absolutely.
There would have to be a substantial change to the structure or something.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Emily, or maybe whichever one.
So I just want to kind of go off what you were saying, Sarah, that it's the contact tracing with like is what the issue is. And if we could have an updated clarification on what that really means, because again, saying the 9 students, we don't know how many would have created a close contact. And again, it's that information. I'm just repeating what you said, but I think it's so important that the information we put out has to be completely accurate, and also reminding people that this is how these things happen so that they're aware, so that they can, as parents and students, make the right decisions. Because even like it changes so often that I know close contact is not repeat, but like the 48 hours, I didn't realize, like, I think everything's changing. So if we're constantly updating parents, families on what all that information is, I think it helps in the decision, like in the making the right decision for your student to stay home or to go to school. You're not affecting that larger population. I think that's really important to get that message out there.
Megan?
I'm just going to follow on from what Emily said, because I agree, getting that information out, but also I'd add on to that the quarantine timelines, because I know we talked about that in reopening. And I wasn't sure of, the exact timeline. So I think just making sure, and I'm sure Dan and Matt will do this in their communications, but it's probably good for everybody to know. So maybe John, just add that to your, very informative newsletters.
I think the word you were going for was lengthy, but you were fine.
Because I think that, that's just important information to know too. And also to follow on from what Matt said. So I think Matt and Dan and everyone here has done a lot of work to make sure that our kids are going to continue to be educated in a structured way when we move into more in-person learning, but it has to be a team effort. So we, as a school district, we can do as much as we are possibly doing, but we also need families to be part of that team too. So I think that's just an important piece to realize. We cannot do this if we're not all working together. And that means, making the decisions that we make, and sending our kids and quarantining if we need to. Yeah. So with that, I do want to say, Matt, thank you for this.
No problem.
I know that there are so many logistics that go into figuring this out. And for me, it was important that any child who's going to go into quarantine still had a structure to their day, still was going to be involved in the learning process while they're out, and have some way to continue to check in with their teachers, so that it's not just, they're out of school for 5 days or 8 days and following along. So, and I think the Wednesday homework club with math is a great idea. I think you've done a great job putting this plan together. So thank you.
Thank you. I'll correct myself. It was 10 cases, not 9. Sorry.
Thanks, Matt. And I'll speak as a middle school parent, and that homework club piece is that so all kids are going to have more access. Like they have that homework club built in anyways, and have had access to it. So that will continue. So, even if they're out, just for that day, they can hop onto that homework club, and the teachers are there, and it's many days of the week. So this sort of, beefing it up, I think, as Matt is talking about, or adding a few additional ones is wonderful, but it's a great resource for kids anyways.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's a fair point. And I think also the other thing that stuck out to me was the ability to have those live classes or to not, because I think different students are going to work differently. Like I know my older child probably wouldn't do that because she can just kind of follow along and she would check in as necessary. But, maybe my other child would need that. So I appreciate the flexibility in the plan too.
Great. Thank you, Matt.
Mr. Bauer.
Good evening. Actually, our plan in a lot of ways mirrors Matt's plan at the vets, but there are some differences. And really looking at the first piece for us will be that April 5th to April 16th timeframe, where we will be half days. The afternoon classes will be remote. So that in a lot of ways mirrors what we're doing now. So our quarantine plan for that 10 days really will mirror what we're doing currently, where once a student is in quarantine, the teacher's notified. And at that point, the afternoon classes, that's the points of contact and the ability to keep up with Google Classroom, and also to be able to use the office hours at the end of the day, where a lot of students will check in with their teachers and also Gmail throughout that 10 days. We feel comfortable that that will get us through that period, as it's done for this year, with our hybrid approach with the afternoon classes that are remote, so students can stay current with that piece. So they're getting daily classes with that piece. So we feel good about that part. It's the second piece that is a little tricky from August, I wish. April 26th, after April break to the end of the school year, where we're now full-time and those afternoon remote classes fall off of the schedule. So that's where the parallel for us would be a lot like the VETS plan, where we'll take the structure of having a quarantine educational coordinator as well. That will be the point person to create daily structure and intersections with the student and with teachers to make sure they stay current with their work. Google Classroom has been just a huge piece for us to stay current, but also looking to add a couple of other components. Currently in our remote cohort, we do have teachers that are available if students access them through the core subjects, and we would be able to add that. And also the opportunity to audit courses as well. Now it's a little trickier for us because we don't offer, we have a lot of courses that are remote taught by our teachers, but it may not be necessarily the level that would be needed, or the course may not match up. But if it's there and it matches the schedule and the matrix, we'd be happy to offer the audit. And that happened with us too. Some students took us up on it and some students didn't. The other complexity with that would be pacing, because we know that one geometry teacher might be a little ahead of the other and a little different place where the remote teacher might be. So there's some comfort level is with that, but it would definitely be offered. And also being able to utilize our support staff to be able to provide check-ins as well for a social emotional component and make sure that we stay current with the work. And really, I'm just looking through my notes. The other piece too is our teachers have done a wonderful job with extra help in maintaining contact with students in quarantine currently, even though we have the afternoon remote classes, and I look for that to continue. And certainly our students utilize the Gmail to communicate with teachers as well. So it's a little trickier from August, I said it again, April 26th, I apologize, than it is.
You are so over this year, Dan, just like the rest of us.
Freudian slip, I know. And then obviously, with the tipping point and such, and, there are differences with each case. Certainly, if they've already been in a situation where they've been quarantined and positive, then it's not going to impact any of the close contacts. So that's negligible. But certainly if you have a situation where a student is at the contagious state and in school, that could multiply through, but it's varied throughout the whole year. It really has. And to say what the group has said in terms of the teamwork, we're committed to doing the best that we can for our students. We've put on a lot of work to make this April 5th transition work with an eye to April 26th. And I know that we all want our students to be safe, our staff to be safe, and we believe we have a really good plan. And obviously, the big piece for us will be the review of the plan through that 10-day period as we revise and make any adjustments that we need.
So through the chair,
Yes.
before we open up to questions, I want to say thank you to Matt and Dan for this. I think is very comprehensive. I will use the joke that I have used regularly when people say, what is it like to be a new superintendent? I say, at least I'm not a high school principal anymore. And Dan Bauer has shown such flexibility and grace and openness to people that have not always demonstrated those qualities in return. And Matt and Dan have just done a great job in getting us to this point. And yeah, there will be some cost of doing business, as I've said, but I'm very confident with Matt and Dan leading this effort that it will we'll get to April 5th, we'll get to April 26th, and through the end of the year.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. I said a few words to them in the reopening group last week, and I may have choked up a little bit, slightly embarrassing, but it's really, really meaningful. And I know that this has been a different type of undertaking than with our little kids. And, as a parent of a middle school kid, I'm really, really grateful that for all the hard work that's gone into this, and that and all the effort to really pull it off. And I'm hoping that the community can kind of come in turn and, like you were saying, Megan, like really, keep kids home that have the sniffles and know it's allergy season. But that we all, kind of to pull Village's saying, we all are tasked with keeping each other well. And that's the way that we're going to be able to pull this off. Sarah?
So I'll ask you the same things I kind of asked Matt. The first is more of a statement. I'm guessing your job's going to be a little bit harder with managing some of these cases in that. I mean, we've all received the letters. There's been more cases in the high school. Not that I'm not saying they're spread in the high school. I think it's just the demographic of, the age group you're dealing with. And it is what it is. So I'm guessing you may have a bigger hurdle with managing that phase system and staying in phase 2. But what as a school committee can we do, if anything, to help you?
Well, I mean, certainly, at the end of the day, just, the continued support that we've received in terms of the mitigation efforts that have come in, that has alleviated a lot of stress with our teachers. And I know the air purifiers, I know that may sound like a small thing, but it's a huge thing. And certainly all those pieces that come into play with just the team and having support. Deanna McMahon has just been outstanding. And obviously we're working closely with her to make sure that through the contact tracing, we're making adjustments, because it's going to take more than just her to help out with that piece. And certainly whenever I've asked for technology pieces, I know Steve Quietek has been there to help us. So if somebody asks for a camera, which we've had teachers ask for cameras and such, that he's been more than receptive to help us on that piece too. And I think just the understanding and the grace that, certainly everybody's been showing, and just that continued support and understanding that there will be bumps in the road. And we know that. And I've talked to our staff about that, but that's okay. When we started hybrid, there were bumps in the road too. And we've been able to manage it. Now I know it's different moving up, but there are components moving in our favor, where April 26th also marks the start of where we have 130 students in senior projects. So they'll be moving out of the building. We're very proud of them for that. And we have some in internships too, as well. So that piece is going to shift, and we've made a large effort to expand as much outdoor space as possible. And we have the giant tent. We have, thanks Nan to the tents that you've provided for us. But definitely hearing teachers talk about and working on ways that we can get our classes outside as much as possible, and be able to spread out as much as possible. In fact, the custodial crew, I know you didn't ask for all this, but we have all the furniture back in. We did it purposely so everybody could wrap their head around, right, a full classroom of furniture a week in advance, so we can make tweaks and adjustments and move forward on that piece. So I think just the continued support, understanding, and grace as we work through this is really, really important for all of us, and supporting our staff, because they've worked really hard. And I know our families have worked hard supporting, and our students have done an outstanding job.
I'm really grateful that I hear that you did that with the desks. I know that was a big thing with our little kids and helping them grasp it, but I think, there's a lot to be said for our big kids as well. So that's great to hear.
I have to give kudos to Rick King and the custodial crew, because they've been working side by side with me, and I'm not easy to put up with on that stuff, but they did an outstanding job just putting all of the furniture in and organizing it, setting it up. And it was a lot for our teachers on Monday, because now we're 6 foot spacing, though the desks were 3. So it was okay to move desks around. And I know they put lines so they know where the 6 foot marker is to separate. And they did a nice, they can't say enough in Todd Bloodgood's leadership with Rick King and the group. So that's been really, really wonderful. And I know our staff appreciates it as well.
And I'm really glad to hear about the air purifiers. I know how important that is. And I think it bears noting, just kind of like some of the contact tracing and everything, how much our research and data has changed since we started school, that we really started with the masking and the surface, the touch surface stuff, and how much money we spent on that. But now our research has really evolved, and it's much more the masking and the air filtration and ventilation piece. So I think it's, I'm thrilled to hear about how many teachers want those in their classrooms, and that's that's going on across the high school. So I think it's really, really important. Anybody else?
No, just another thank you. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Matt.
Same, thank you. You can really tell that there's this great pride in our school district, and it's really great to see it in these meetings and just how hard everybody's been working, and it makes you really proud to be a part of it. So just thank you guys so much for all your work. And the custodian, I don't think they get enough credit. Like, I just hearing what they've done all year, it's so impressive, and they get a huge shout out too. And the teachers and the students too, everybody. We should really feel good about ourselves for making it all the way back to school. Right?
Yes.
Celebrate.
Yeah, I'd like to echo that as well. Thanks, Dan, thanks, Matt. All the schools, right down to Evelyn School, that, everybody that's opened back up. And we've been, as we say, through so many changes and so many different plans, and remote for a couple of weeks here, and back to hybrid, and all that everybody's been through. Thanks for the leadership, and then thanks for everybody, as you say, Dan, that's just on the ground making it happen and getting it done for the students. It's really exciting that we can hopefully see light at the end of the tunnel with the vaccinations coming through, and things should be getting better for all of us. So yeah, thank you very much.
I would like to add thanks to Matt Fox. I know he's off the screen, but the collaboration has been really helpful for all of us working together, because it's a lot of things. I know, Matt, I had to throw that out there. I'm sorry, but it's been great, because really you get into these silos sometimes, but you can't do it alone, and it's too big of a job. So not only with our staff and our people, but the vets collaboration's been outstanding.
Yeah, I think Dan and I would typically text as late as 10 o'clock at night when he's done with events, yada, yada, yada. So yeah, it's been great. Been great this year.
Great. Well, again, thank you both for that update. Nan, did you have something to add?
So before Nan jumps in,
Yeah.
I just wanted to give her an intro. I think that as much as we are celebrating back to school and return to full in person, that we do have a full remote cohort that are remaining remote. And so Nan has been so lovely in making sure that they feel part of the enthusiasm for what's going on and are not feeling left out or left behind. So teed you up there nicely, Nan.
Great, thank you. Yeah, just wanting to echo that with all of the transitioning that's happening, and the planning and the thoughtful design for academics and social emotional support for our in-person learners, that is being mirrored in conversations for our students that are remaining in full remote. I have met twice this month with our remote K through 6 staff, and we have talked about ways in which to continue to build community, to help students feel connected, as some of those students that they've been learning with all year long transition back into in-person. It's going to feel different. Their classroom settings are going to feel different with different members of their school community missing. So how do we work together to make sure that our full remote students still feel very much connected to the Marblehead Public Schools and to their individual elementary schools? So those conversations are happening. The teachers will continue to plan and align curriculum with their colleagues. And as the spring emerges and weather enhances, we will be strategically thinking about how do we provide opportunities when families feel safe for students to acclimate to a school setting again. So whether we have some opportunities for them to come and play on outside structures in schools, or maybe have socially distanced activity in a gym for the class. We want to make sure that we continue to think about those students and make sure that they feel connected to their school communities. So tomorrow night for any cohort C families, there's going to be a conversation. A Zoom link went home in an email yesterday. If you have any questions or concerns or wonders about your full remote student in their spring term, that would be a great opportunity for you to get some clarification. So just want everybody to know, Back Together MHD is all of us, and that includes our full remote students as well.
Great. Thank you, Nan.
Thanks, Dan.
All right. I think that does it, correct?
Correct.
Okay. That leads us on to our FY22 budget update. Michelle, I will let you join us, and I assume Michelle's taking it away?
Yes.
All right, great.
Okay.
You do have co-hosting as well, so if you want to share your screen, you can.
Okay. So at the budget subcommittee or joint budget meeting this morning that we held this morning, we updated the group as to some discussions that have been going on. The town has indicated to us that while they certainly see our budget requests as being needed, they still have budget constraints on their side. They are awaiting their free cash figures still, and that should be coming hopefully any day now. But with that being said, we have taken some action to reduce some of our budget asks. Some of them have happened through just a variety of the need being funded in other manners, and some of them have been decided that they are in lower priority. The leadership team has continued to meet, and we have prioritized our budget priority list that we've been talking about for weeks and seems like months on end, but I know it's only been a number of weeks now, into a high level of priority, a medium level of priority, and a low level of priority. And that's on your screen now, or you should see it, with the green box being the high, the yellow box being the medium, and the pink box being the low priority. You will also notice that there is now a third column on this sheet, because this sheet has been around for a few weeks now. This is what our current budget ask is consisting of. So we made some changes, and I'll just go through the changes. I won't go through every single line item that we've talked about previously, but request number 2, which I had numbered them just for reference purposes a couple of weeks back. So number 2 was the technology capital leases. We are planning on funding that through basically one-time stimulus funds and taking that out of the operating budget at this point. So that is a reduction in the amount of $212,706. The next change to this is in the yellow box in terms of the Brown custodian. We have had discussions with our facilities director, and we feel while this is a need and we have a great new school coming online, we have 4 full-time custodians at Glover, and we currently have 4 full-time custodians slated to go to the Brown school. We can use a half of a custodian from another school to put them there to make 4.5 for this year. This would be an interim measure, and we will certainly expect to see this request again next year. Item request number 8 is to change the Bright tutor at the high school to a Bright teacher. This is a great program. We're actually just in the 2nd year of that program at this point. And this program has been very successful, and just maybe right now without having, the budget funds that we had hoped for, we put off this change in the program. It would not reduce our current program. It just might limit our capacity in the future to be able to administer some of the services to those students. And then all of the budget priorities that we termed into the lowest bucket number 3 in the pink, we would put off for now. Right now, we are realizing that the need for Glover Allied Arts teachers is not needed because we are able to share some with the Allied Arts teachers at the Brown School. Marblehead High School position from the director of guide. It would be an increase to make the current position a director of guidance. So we can put that off for right now. Facilities, we had requested administration support and a groundskeeper. We do have some administration support in the budget. This was actually just increasing the level of support, and this was increasing a groundskeeper that we do not have. We do have a memorandum of understanding with the Park and Rec Department, who does provide our mowing and whatnot. This was just in addition to do some of the cleanup, and we're hoping to be able to put in some programs with volunteers and maybe clean up some of that and do a little bit of contracted services when needed for our landscaping. And the last two items is central admin for the community relations liaison. We can put that on the back burner for now, use some contracted services when needed only. And then last is the replacement of the scoreboard at the high school. And certainly that is a need, but it can probably also be fundraised or funded at another time. So with those changes, our bottom line budget comes down to a total number of $42,005,724. If you go up to these little boxes up on the right side, basically previously we had talked about, we had a remaining for budget priorities. There was a rounding figure in there. So those of you who actually saw the sheet earlier, there has been a change of about $250. The remaining budget priorities of $288,000. We apply that to our budget priority listing, which our modified listing totals $619,350. And we have a delta or a gap of $331,206. At that point, this is where our budget currently stands. And basically we will be, looking for feedback at the budget hearing and how to move forward with that figure at this time. There is another sheet. Are you able to see the tracking sheet right now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I updated the tracking sheet just a little while ago. And so this is the initial budget presentation where we started at $42,649,142. And then I listed each of the changes. We removed additional fellow requests because they were not able to supply us with an additional fellow. There was just not the availability. So we reduced that out of our budget for $26,900. We reduced one technology and curriculum specialist by one each, that request, and that came down to a reduction of $121,120. The academic skills teacher at the high school, we were able to actually find funding in another position that is no longer needed at the high school. So we're just going to slide over the funding into that position. It's not a position that's being cut. It's just being funded by available funds from another position at the school. The capital IT leases, as I discussed earlier, we're looking at one-time funding for those and to remove those out of the operating budget, and the amount is $212,706. One thing we didn't discuss in the previous sheet, we're adding back the village teacher leader stipends of $44,057, basically to cut the teacher leader stipends from one location and not the others, because we do have teacher leader stipends at all of our locations. Could be problematic. So at this time, we are not looking or taking that as an offset into our budget. And then lastly, we are removing the budget items 7 through 13 on that budget priority list, and the total of those is the $271,360, and that brings us down to the figure that I had mentioned before, the $42,005,724. And I don't know if John has anything else he would like to add at this time.
No, I think that the next step is for Jason and I to get together, as was discussed at the budget subcommittee meeting, and to talk about the remaining 331,206 to see where we can find common ground.
Yeah. Can I add a few things? I think, Michelle, thanks for updating that budget tracking sheet. I think that's helpful. But I just, I do want to address some of the questions that came up earlier. And I don't know if I noted them all down, but the changes that Michelle just went through, just so everyone's kind of clear on what the process has been. is the leadership team, so John, the principal, central admin, they came up with those sets of priorities, right? And then they went through and prioritized them. And then as they meet every week, I think it is, they continue to revise those as their plans change or as something comes up. So that's how that list has been updated through the leadership team meetings. And they, and then they went through and prioritized those high, medium, and lows. So that's been that process. I think they've done a good job kind of continuing, it's what Bill always says, it's an iterative process, and it has been, this whole time. I want to make sure I get everything. The other piece that John mentioned that came out of our meeting today is that we do still, as noted, we do still have a gap of 331. So the task is really for John and Jason to get together and figure out how to get that down to 0. And I have full confidence that between the two of them, they're going to get there. They're both, they both are collaborative, and, we all know what the wants are. We all know what the issues are. And I have full confidence that they will make that happen, and then we'll reconvene as necessary, probably again with that joint group, and obviously with the school committee once we've gotten through that. And the other thing that I think is really important to note here, and it's honestly just terminology, but these are priorities to add into our existing educational services. There are no cuts at all. And again, it's terminology, but we're not cutting anything. So these are the things that the leadership team have, listed as things that will take us to the next step. And then they prioritize them as they should do through good budgeting processes into high, medium, and lows. And those are the ones that we need to tackle. So, the Brown piece, we've got 4.5 custodians. We're not cutting custodians at the Brown School. We've got 4.5 custodians to maintain that building. If we need to add more, then we will add more as necessary. And so again, I just want to be clear that there are no cuts. I think what you will see in Michelle's spreadsheet is that we are consolidating some elementary schools. So where there's overlap, then yes, we're consolidating, but we're not cutting services. And I just think that's an important piece for everyone to be on the same page about.
Absolutely. Sarah Fox, I know you got your hand raised.
So I sat in on this morning, and it was made abundantly clear that there is no money over level funded. FinCom said it. They used the words that they spoke to the liaisons, and they said you chose not to go for an override. At that time, you knew that you were getting level funded. That is what it is. Now, as upsetting as that statement was, it was clear. There was no ambiguity. That means this $331,000 delta. Now, that's a whole nother thing, because I do have concerns of how we went from, at the last public meeting, an $826,000 delta to a $331,000 delta. But that's another point. That $331,000 delta, you might not like the word cut. I mean, you can put any color lipstick on the pig that you want, but at the end of the day, it's pig. That 331 is coming off some way. Either these priorities are getting cut. And again, let me be clear. These are priorities. This is not a wish list. We're not asking to add new curriculum, math curriculum, because our curriculum is expired, but we're not looking to, update to the new teaching methods. We're not looking to, move forward in the way of progress. These are bare minimums. Earlier, Megan, you pointed out these numbers are to keep our lights on. Like, the statement was made earlier that we're not cutting fat anymore. At this point, it's muscle and bone. And that's true, but this is muscle and bone of our students' education. And Ben Berman made the comment that this is very typical for the budget process. And there's no truer statements made. It is very typical, and it's very, very sad. Here we are yet again, trying to find some way with chewing gum and tape to spackle together an education system. And at the end of the day, I know it makes it hard for the realtors to sell a house in a town with a failing education system, but we are not investing in the education of our students. We can't keep providing the bare minimums. There will be cuts. We are going to be taxed with the idea of there's $331,000 of these priorities. Things like technology, capital leases, which by the way, we're funding with one-time revenue. We know this lease is over 3 years. We're funding it with one-time revenue that we know we have for 1 year. Anybody in finance will tell you that is a terrible idea. And I don't blame Michelle. This is the only tool left in our toolbox. I get that. But this is pathetic. This is the best we can do. Then we're math curriculum. That's in that $331,000 is math curriculum. So basically, we're going to be taxed with the tough decision of, do we want to replace an outdated math curriculum that's no longer current, or do we want to lay off 2 teachers to pay for it? And I know everyone's going to get furious that I said the god awful word, but at the end of the day, we're walking in a store with $5 in our pocket and we're trying to buy a product that's worth $6. And at the end of the day, you can spend the money you have, and we don't have the money. So it is our job. Collaboration is great, guys, but it stops being great when we're defunding our schools. And at the end of the day, our job as elected officials is to secure the funding we need for our schools. And we need these things. We need to staff the preschool at the Brown School. I personally, night after night after night, went out on my personal time and stumped for this school. And I know that speech on my sleep, what people were going to get if they voted for a $54 million school. They were going to end transient staff. And we gave the whole list of why this was important. Guess what, folks? We're not ending transient staff. We were going to have parity with all these programs. And if one child had a special need, they were going to be able to go to the school that had that too. Guess what, folks? We're not funding that either. So at the end of the day, we can put as much lipstick on the pig as we want, but everyone that was in those meetings and knew what we were selling, including FinCom, they're on our board. They knew we were staffing this building. Why all of a sudden are we not staffing it? Why all of a sudden is it a question if we can staff that preschool program? They knew we were building it. I mean, they stood and watched us pitch it to the town, and now we're not gonna fund it? Like, come on, this is beyond ridiculous. The line has been drawn in the sand. We are either gonna do our job and fund our schools, or we have no place on school committee.
So I'm pretty sure Eric has spoken multiple times about the positions at the programs at the Brown School. And he's made it abundantly clear that he has huge plans for that, and that those plans are all within his framework of how that building is going to go. If we want to go back to the previous administration, we can go back to the previous administration, but
it's line item 1 in the list, Sarah. Read the list. That it's line item 1 in the $331,000.
We've got a $331,000 delta that I don't think anyone, I missed a vote if we've taken a vote that we're not funding these things. So I'm confused as to why you've just written them all off, Sarah.
Because we don't have, I'm not writing the check. The town just told us today they can't give us the money. The money doesn't, we don't print it. We're not monopoly.
We have not voted this budget. We haven't even been to our budget hearing. So again, I'm really confused as to half the things that you said, as to this is gone and this is gone and this is gone. Like, okay, that's not how I'm doing this. These are not
without
gone.
Funding it, it's gone.
Right. And we have not voted our budget. And so we are still working on this. That's the mindset that I'm in here. And so, have that if that's not your mindset.
I would propose that if we do not have secured funding for a budget, that we do not have a budget hearing and present it. I think it's disingenuous at best to have a budget hearing on a budget that we do not have secured funding on. And so Thursday, I would propose we postpone that budget, since we clearly do not have secured funding on our whole budget. As you noted, the 331 is still up in the air. So we cannot present a confirmed, fully funded budget.
So to the best of my understanding, we don't vote the budget that day anyways. And so there's zero reason why we can't get community feedback on the priorities that we've identified and gone over and over and over. And that's what we're there for. That's what the public hearing does. We sit and we listen, John presents, the community has input, and then we take that input and we think about it. And if it's still going back and forth with the town, it gives us even more leverage to say, hey, these are our priorities, period. So I see no reason why we have to, because there are lots of posting rules and everything with the hearing. So if we cancel that on this Thursday, which you guys can decide to do that if you want, but if we cancel that, it's the far punt. It's not getting rescheduled for next week. That's illegal.
So can I just, I did talk to Dorothy, our MASC rep, on the public hearing, just to, because the past couple of years have been chaotic at best. So I just wanted to kind of get a better feel for, from her perspective, what's the purpose of the public hearing? And what's the best approach for us to take? And that was her response, is that really it's right now it's the superintendent's recommended budget. And so bringing it through the public hearing is to get community feedback on specifically these priorities that the leadership team has identified. And Sarah, I take your point. There's still some pieces that we have to work out, but I think we need to be honest about those. This is where we're at, but we're looking for community feedback on the priorities that the superintendent and his leadership team have put forward. So just another perspective to consider.
Anybody else?
I would like to make a motion to postpone our public hearing until we have secured funding for the number we present. So when people make comment and ask questions, they're asking questions and commenting on a number we are actually able to fund. So my motion is to postpone the hearing.
So there's a motion on the floor. Does anybody want to second that?
Please note for the record, no other school committee members wanted to second the motion to postpone the meeting until we have a secured number to present to the public. Please let the minutes reflect that.
Ask a question.
Absolutely.
So every year we have our priorities, correct?
Yeah.
And do we go to the public hearing with the funding already granted, or don't we? I feel like we're just following the process.
We are just following the process.
We're following the same process.
Yeah,
Because we
so
still have
it's
to go,
Right.
present in front of FinCom, and we still have to vote our budget.
So this is just precedent, this is what happens. I just want to make that clear
Yes.
before. Okay,
Yes. Usually there is a more solid number on the town side,
okay,
but nothing about this year has
well, right.
been normal. And so there's a lot of moving pieces on their side, but that does not mean that we cannot move forward with our budget preparations. We are our own independent board.
Making that clear.
And I think we're at the point where, especially with this list of priorities, it's worthwhile getting community feedback.
Absolutely.
I mean, the priorities aren't gonna, maybe they're gonna change a little bit, but I would be surprised, considering all the work that the superintendent's done at this point, that the priorities would change at this point. So I think, in terms of what he's looking to do next year, it's worth getting community feedback.
And I just want to point out too that I feel the same way that Sarah does, in that there was never a question that this stuff would not be funded, right? I mean, as far as I've been, talking and asking a lot of questions, that's the answers that I've been getting.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another, I don't know. I feel the same way. That has never come that, no, we are not going to fund our priorities.
And that's how we left today, to be honest, or this morning. We left that with, John and Jason are going to get together and they'll report back to us.
Yeah, so we still don't know.
Yeah, I think it's would it be great if this was all wrapped up in a nice little bow? Absolutely, but I haven't experienced a nice little bow. You know, I look forward to that maybe at some point. But that's, you know, that's not been the experience that I've had with the budget. So
Can I ask, do you believe more funding is coming our way, or do you not see that? I mean, because the way I see it is, if what we were told today is true and this is the final number, we have no other funding mechanisms. I mean, we have a limited, by Massachusetts general law, way to fund our budget. We can do it through the general fund. We can do it with a combination of that and an override. We can, I mean, in theory, challenge the number that FinCom is presenting at town meeting with our own number, but I mean, legally we can do it. I don't think that it's going to be successful. But there's a limited amount of legal ways to fund this. So if their number is $331,000 off of our number, and we fund these pieces, we have to cut from somewhere else. There's only so much money in our wallet to buy what we need. And if we don't want to cut anything, then we can't get these things. And for every one of these things we want, we have to cut something else. It is simple arithmetic.
well, I think it bears noting, we are not the only budget process in town right now. And so just as we've discussed over and over and over that this is an iterative process, priorities are being maneuvered, you know, some of them are being found that they're not necessary anymore, you know, they're being filled in other ways. My assumption is that that's going on at other levels of the town as well. And so as with previous years that I've been involved in this, these numbers have continued to kind of develop and come forward as we've gone through this process up until our vote. And so that's where my head is at this evening, is that, you know, I was working, I could not sit in on that meeting this morning. But, you know, I've heard a few times at this point that Jason and John are getting together to discuss and figure this out. My sincere hope is that it will be discussed and figured out, and that this 331,000 delta will be met. If it's not, then we discuss other options. Anybody else?
So just let me address the override conversation, because I think it might be the elephant in the room, and depending on who you're talking to, it's credit or blame. But as the new superintendent, I did not think this was the year for an override. Now, I realize if I had been here the last 3 to 5 years and heard this isn't the year for an override, just how frustrating that might be. But the schools have been closed for a year. We've not operated the district outside of a pandemic. We're opening a $50 million new school. We're closing 2 other schools. We're on the precipice of a strategic plan, which will have a lot of budget implications for next year. And so we didn't go for the override. The ship has sailed. I don't think you have time to make a cogent argument for an override this year. And again, credit or blame, we're not going for an override, but I'm not done advocating for the schools. And so my focus is that next meeting with Jason, and recognizing that I think I read the feel that an override, this wasn't the year. And again, I don't have 3 years of experience of hearing this isn't the year. So I appreciate that frustration. But coming out of a pandemic, the schools being closed, knowing we have a facilities audit coming in, we have a strategic plan coming up, none of those pieces added up to make a decision in August, November to say we're going for an override. And again, I'm just coming off an accreditation visit at a school community that just did an override, but it was a 2-year process. And they did it because their high school students couldn't take AP classes. The sections filled up, they had to offer them on alternating years. They were cutting co-curriculars. Again, it's an apples and oranges comparison, but if we go for the override, we want to be in lockstep with the town, make this a joint effort, and do it successfully. And so as the new superintendent, I didn't want to advocate for an override and see it fail. So if that's the elephant in the room, that we didn't go for the override, credit or blame, we didn't, but I'm not done advocating for the schools. That's what you hired me to do. I have a $331,000 delta that we have to figure out, and that's what I'll do. I will work with Jason. And again, I feel like we have a good collaborative working relationship, and we will be able to get there. And all the communication that I have with people tends to lead me to that conclusion that we will get there.
And I really appreciate you saying that, John, because I think you're right. It is the elephant in the room. We've talked about it for so long, and no one wants an override more than me, right? Like that was the first thing I said to you when you started, probably before you even started in Marblehead. But I also have to understand, and I do understand the logic and the reason behind that. And, you know, if we were in a different situation, maybe it would have been a different decision, but we're not. We're in a pandemic, and we like last year, we just got the budget cleaned up and we're still finding issues. So that's like our base year, right? That's where we start kind of developing our trends from. And this year would have been a great thing to have a second year of that. And we don't. We kind of like, because of COVID, everything went up in the air. So, you know, to even build some of those long-term trends is going to take some work. And we've got 1 year to base it on right now, 1 year of good data. So yeah, I think, you know, for better or worse, that's a logical, rational, reasonable decision to get to. And, you know, that's where we're at, and we'll figure it out.
And I don't want to diminish anyone's frustration because it's real.
Yeah,
and I get it. But I do have colleague superintendents who the conversation in their communities began with find $1 million to cut. You're not being level funded. You're going to cut $1 million. And so as frustrating as this 331 is, we're starting in a place better than some neighboring communities.
I also think it bears noting that there's a lot of stimulus coming in still. And I know that that is not sound budgeting, generally speaking, but there's a lot of money coming in, a lot of taxpayer money being flushed into the town, which the town has done a great job of filtering a lot of that money into the schools. So my assumption is that will continue to happen. And you know, that yes, we've got to vote our budget. And again, I just as much as John, I'm committed to that 300,000, 331 some odd. But you know, just as we've seen this year, you know, these things happen and there's some fluidity with them, and there's other, you know, there's other ways in which this, you know, some of these other things may be able to be taken care of as well. Again, this is not something that we want to punt into the future for sure, but it's also a reality where we're at right now. And so, and with all the COVID pieces sort of coming in and out of all of this, I think it bears saying. David, I know you've got your hand up. Sorry if I spoke over you.
No, I just want to speak to the lipstick on a pig analogy, and probably the single biggest thing I take offense to. I've lived in Marblehead for 22 years. I have a son who is a sophomore in college, and he was probably as well prepared as he could have been coming from any public school or any private school in Massachusetts. And I've said that to Dan Bauer when he was a freshman on, you know, how ahead of the game Ryan was when he got into school. And that's a thanks to the teachers, the staff, the administration. It's a lot more than lipstick on a pig. We have an excellent school district here. We have dedicated employees that have gone through a pandemic. They've shifted through multiple phases. They've worked through difficult conditions to come up and try and do the best they can for our students. And Marblehead will continue to be an outstanding district. And this town has funded education and will continue to fund education. We funded a new Glover School We're funding a $55 million school that will open in September. That is the last phase of a 20-year master plan. If we want to add up all the money that this town has put in to fund our schools. And so Marblehead doesn't turn its back on our schools. We're working through this process to do the best we can. And just like Dr. Bucky said, he hasn't given up advocating for the schools, no more than anybody at this table on school committee has given up advocating for our schools. We're trying to find a solution in a difficult time. And I think we'll come up with the right solution and we'll move forward to be able to fund what our district needs. But I'm offended by the lipstick on a pig comment. We have an outstanding school district. We provide an excellent education here. And we have over 600 people who come to work every day to provide the education to our students. And we're providing $43 million, close to $43 million. We're not laying anybody off. We're not furloughing people. People are getting raises. People are getting step and lane changes. We're doing the best we can given the circumstances that we have. And additionally, having been a FinCom member and working with the town, this is a town process. And as Jackie said on our meeting today, these meetings have been more transparent than they've ever been in the last 20 years. People can Zoom in. You don't have to come to meetings in person. You can hear what's going on. You can ask questions in public comment. And it's been about as transparent as it could ever have been, rather than having to take time off and show up at a meeting at 8 o'clock in the morning at Widger Road, as opposed to being able to Zoom on. So I want to thank everybody for their efforts at getting us to this point. And I think that the comments that have been made, it's an iterative process. We're not at the end. We've already had an infusion of close to $2.3 million of federal funds. And as an example, we bought over 330 laptops for our educators. And we've been told that another $6 million is coming to Marblehead for expenditures in the next 3 years. So maybe it's not the situation that everybody wants, but we're in a pretty good place. And I think everybody's committed to making it the best education we can offer, pre-K to 12 in Marblehead. And I'm proud to be a school committee member, and I want to thank everybody for their efforts.
Sarah?
So I want to be very clear that I have always and continue to be incredibly impressed with what all of our staff is able to do with what we give them. I think they show up every day with enthusiasm and forethought and provide amazing, things. What my concern is every year we make it harder for that staff by not doing our job and getting these additional funds. And I for one want to give them the tools that they can use. I don't ever doubt that, the teachers and the principals and the staff and everybody that we employ will show up every day and do an amazing job. I do not personally feel that as a school committee member, as a collective unit, we are giving them our best effort and giving them what we need. That is my personal opinion. Agree or disagree, that is my personal opinion. And I know what your opinions are. David, I heard what you said tonight, and it was the same thing you said last year and the year before. And I know you don't agree with the lipstick on the pig, and I am sorry if I offended you. That was not my intention. However, when we have the same conversation year after year after year with no varying results, I see a problem. And that is where we are again this year.
It's not about offending me, Sarah. So thank you for your comments, though.
So I think that leads us into our final item this evening, which is the budget public hearing discussion. This is something that Sarah, you had asked for at our last meeting. I know we've talked about it a little bit earlier, and kind of how whether it'll run and a little bit of how it will run. So I will open the floor. I know, Megan's talked with Dorothy, I've talked with Dorothy. And does anybody else have anything, or anybody have anything to add?
I also spoke to Dorothy, and my takeaway between that and the way we've handled it in town and the state guidance on what a hearing entails is that it's the opportunity for the public to seek clarification and choose their questions and concerns. So I want to make sure that we, as that governing body, are answering their questions and concerns.
So in my conversations with Dorothy, she talked about it as it's the superintendent's budget. He presents it at this hearing, and then the community gets to weigh in. And in a similar fashion to public comment, if there are things that we can speak to, whether it's the superintendent or the school committee, then we absolutely can. But that it's not a forum, it's a hearing. And that, we haven't voted it. We've said tonight, it's still being worked on, as it has been in years past. And so, if we don't know the answer to something, I'm not going to be pressured to put words to something that I'm not prepared to speak to. Megan, I know you talked to Dorothy too.
Yeah, I think it's similar to what you said. I guess I'd like to just maybe see if we can, because yes, public comment to get the feedback, but I think in this case, there probably will be some questions, and I think the challenge is, sometimes we get like 200 or 1,000 people on these. So the interactive piece makes it challenging just purely from the volume. But I do think if there's questions, we should address them. So one suggestion I have is that as people make their comments or give their feedback, their constructive feedback, we should just be taking notes of those questions. So that at the end, we can say, all right, let's address some of the questions we've heard. If there are questions we can't answer, then that's okay. We just have to say that. And then also identify themes that we've heard throughout the night. And, I'm sure there will be some themes. And then just be able to kind of replay that back. So again, that people feel not just like they have the opportunity to speak, but they're really being heard and that we're addressing their questions. And then the important part is taking that feedback through the next step in the process, right? So that would be my suggestion.
I can get behind that. Yeah, I don't think it's yeah. And sorry if I was unclear, because that's not too far off from.
Yeah, I think so. Okay.
Anybody else have anything to add on that? Okay.
I'd like to motion for a second round of public comment. We had said a few meetings ago, we would try to offer it at the beginning and end of meetings. So I'm making a motion for public comment at this time.
All right, so there's a motion for public comment. Does anybody want a second? Megan, second. All right, Sarah Gold, yes. Emily Barron? Megan Taylor? Sarah Fox?
Yes.
And David Harris?
Yes.
All right. Catherine Martin, I see your hand up.
Yeah, good evening, Catherine Martin, 29 West Shore Drive. I do have a big issue with you going forward with your budget hearing without having a clean number. It's going to, all of the questions that people have are going to be based on a finalized budget, and going forward with a hearing with a $300,000 delta is disingenuous. One. Two, our planning board, our ZBA, and our conservation commission all hold public hearings every 2 weeks. So maybe you could zoom in and see how it works. The public has interaction with the boards. They answer questions. There's a back and forth. There is clear guidance from the state on how public hearings work. And it's not a collection of questions that you answer at the end. It is a back and forth in order to fact find and get information. This is a no-brainer. I mean, these hearings happen all the time across the state. You don't get to pick and choose which questions you want to answer. At the end of the day, if you don't know the answer, just like Sarah Gold said, you don't answer. You say, I'm sorry, I don't have that information tonight. But I'm going to tell you, you're going to have a lot less information if you don't have a final number. And you're going to box yourself in a corner if you go into this public hearing with this delta and the town does not give you the funding. Because then you have to explain to your constituents why you were able to answer questions about funding that doesn't exist. So I would really, really take a minute and think about going into a public hearing without having a clear budget number. And also take a minute on the format in which you do it. Thanks again. Have a good night.
Thanks. All right, I don't have anybody else's hand up, so I will adjourn us at 9:02. Thank you, everyone.